So hello again, my name is Alex. Thank you for your patience with all the setup. So the first from our series of presentation is an overview of what's new in oXygen version 17, which was released somewhat a month ago. And because it is a major version, it packs a lot of major features, also a lot of smaller things that are also quite important for certain people, so we will try to cover them both. At some point I will talk about some features that we consider of greater importance, so we've scheduled individual presentations during this day, but I will still mention a few words just to convince you that it's worth staying the whole day and see them all. So let's begin. A lot of work in this version was towards automatic error fixes. So what are these quick fixes? Well, we can use to easily understand the concept, we can take the example of a spelling error. So usually when you've misspelled a word, you get a feedback, in this case a highlight, which tells you that this word wasn't found in the dictionary. But at the meantime, you're also getting a number of possible solutions, words that are similar with what you've written there. And fixing the error is just as simple as selecting the correct entry. And that's it. And we can take the same concept and apply it to XML. So when you have an XML error, there are cases in which you can identify a number of possible solutions, and it would be great if you could just present them to the user and he can just fix the error by just one click. These quick fixes in oXygen aren't that new. We've introduced them in version 16, which is like a year ago. And at that time we've introduced quick fixes for XSLT scripts for situations like in which you are calling a template and it's not the right template, or you're using a variable and that variable is not yet defined. For all these situations you'll get a quick fix and a solution to that problem. We also put these quick fixes in AND scripts, and for XML validated with XML schemas. What we brought new in version 17 are quick fixes for when you are editing XML with Relax and G, and quick fixes based on Schematron. So first let's take a look at what a quick fix. So the one based on Relax NG. So this is a Docbook 5 document, and it uses a relaxing schema. And at some point I have an error here, and it's saying that my element is incomplete, must have a given child. And the quick fix means that here on the left I have a little light bulb, and from the pop-up I can select which child to add. This is one. Of course I need to add a different another child, maybe a paragraph. to make the document valid. Another example is that of when you are using an attribute and it doesn't exist in your schema, in which case you'll get an image. Well, a quick fix is quite simple, just remove it. So we've talked about this. The Schematron quick fixes are even more interesting. We've allocated a full presentation for these later on, but let me just mention a few words. So this is part of our guided XML authoring idea that you will heard about it throughout the whole day, maybe tomorrow too. And the idea is that when authoring an XML document, you will get into error situations, and what we want is to guide the author in these situations to put him on the right track. And for that, Schematron is great, because you are writing the business rule and you provide hints, you describe what the error is, describe some possible solutions, but it all ends there. So you're just giving it some hints on how to solve the problem, and it's up to the user to follow that procedure, and maybe it will miss a few steps and get into trouble again, and that's where quick fixes come in, which is basically in the Schematron. You're not only giving error messages, you also provide a little script for automatically. Yes, I know. But George has many more to tell you about this topic. So the SQF is initiated by Nico Kuchrauer. There's also an W3C community group working on a standard right now, and this is a message from the next day we've released oXygen. It's a message from the TI list, and it's basically a user that it's telling how Schematron quick fixes helped him in situation that previously took around a minute to fix an error. Now it's all fixed in just one click. Took around a minute per change. So it really helps, and some of you already know that. A part of this guiding the author initiative is the AutoCorrect support that we've added in version 14. The AutoCorrect idea is quite simple. One use case in which it helps is when you're misspelling a word, it will automatically correct it, replace it with a correct word. Or it may be an easy way to insert special characters, like the copyright character right here. And so the idea is quite simple. But what we've brought new is that we are XML language aware. So if your paragraph are in different languages, the AutoCorrect mappings that will apply depend on that language. So for example, here in this paragraph, if I misspell the about word, it's gonna replace it with the about. I have a little highlight here that gives me a hint that something automatically happened behind the scenes. Maybe it's not something that I desire. And I also get a little pop-up to understand what happened. I can change back to that word if the replacement wasn't the correct one, or I can stop correcting, go into options. Pretty much standard stuff.
This part was developed after 17?
Yes, I know, but it's great, and I wanted to show
so
it.
in 17 it's just the autocorrect happens automatically, but you know, we already added this drop down where you can you can undo right in 17, but then you can also stop correcting that problem. And
So after the 17 release, we got some feedback, and we got excited that people like it, and we went even further. Yes?
Is specific to the author mode, and does it work as well in text mode?
Well, yes. For starters, we thought it would make more sense to put it in the author mode. But it's an idea to also provide it for the text page. We've got an issue recorded for that. If you think it would help, then you should write on the feedback. That will definitely help push the feature on. So.
I think generally speaking, I find it confusing a feature that works only in author mode and text mode, because they make it very different.
Yes. We started a bit late during the release period with this feature, so for now it just works on the author or on the author page. And like I said, it's also aware on the XML language attribute. So for example, this paragraph here is in it's marked as being in French language. So now if I the cur will be replaced with a cur as it should be. So if I don't have this special character on my keyboard, it will help. This support is extendable, so we are supporting the LibreOffice AutoCorrect dictionaries. They're basically an XML file with mappings between misspelled words and replacements. So if we don't offer AutoCorrect for a specific language, you can just go and download the LibreOffice dictionaries, drop them in a specific location in oXygen, and it will start to work. The feature is also extendable. What I meant is that I have a mouse here. So, like I said, it's just a list of mappings, and you can give additional dictionaries, and you can merge these dictionaries. There's a naming convention that I won't go into details right now, but for example, if you are using medical terms from English, you can just add a dictionary with these additional medical terms, and they will merge with the other mappings. We also have the possibility to use the additions based on the spell checker. So normally when you already seen, so when you misspell the word, the spell checker gives you some possibilities, and you can automatically use these possibilities for AutoCorrect too. Have I spoken too much about AutoCorrect? Hopefully not. I was a bit involved in that feature, so I'm kind of biased towards it. Another big addition in version 17 is the XML refactoring tool. So to present things simply, it's a wizard in which the user first selects an operation that it wants to perform on a set of files. Then it gives some values for a few parameters, and after that the source file get updated. But I won't talk more about this feature because I will present it later, and I still want some mystery to remain. A lot of effort was invested into an improved user interface, because it's great to have a lot of feature and a lot of power, but it helps a lot if you're having a great interface, a very intuitive interface. So that's what our goal was. And towards that goal, we now have support for Retina and HiDPI support. what that means is that we'll automatically detect these type of displays, and we're gonna use some double resolution icons. So on these displays, oXygen will look crisp and quite pleasant. Are any of you using HiDPI? Well, maybe in the short future. Oh, let's see them. Great. Well, you're never gonna want to go back to previous oXygen versions, that's for sure. Another new feature was a dark color theme. We call it a Graphite. It looks like this. So for some, a dark color theme is just a matter of taste or preferences. For others, it's a necessity. It's an accessibility aspect. So in this version, we have such a dark theme, and right, and it's so everything it's in tune with this theme. There's the icons on the toolbars have been redesigned for this dark theme. It was actually a lot of work, because now with the HiDPI support we have 4 icons for each, like a normal and a high resolution and a light and dark theme. The author mode also abides by this theme completely. In the author mode, this was all possible by the addition of 2 media rules, so black and a white one. So I can now write rules that will apply to a dark theme or to a white theme.
Just a comment here. We will add the media.
Yes, I know.
Query with the dark, oXygen dark, and this high contrast basically will be for if you have accessibility problems.
So right now, if you switch your windows into a high contrast theme, oXygen will automatically pick that up, and in author mode with these rules. Yes.
But I think that for framework, when we have the watch, we need to do this work.
In the CSS.
If you want to respond,
yes.
if the user is using a high contrast or a dark theme. So
and also, if you want to
provide an interface that interfaces with that theme, you can put rules and change files.
And also, if you want to be more friendly with the high DPI screens, in the author mode there is a naming convention. So again, in the framework, in the CSS, if you are referring an image, and let's say it has this name, there is a naming convention to choose a better image. So if you are on a high pixel density screen, it's going to put 2x here in the name, and it will look for this image, and if the image exists, then it's going to use this image. And the same goes for the dark themes. So you might,
if you add the dark at the end, then if the current theme is a dark one, that image will be used.
it will fall back to the default one. Yes.
So by default it will use the search 24 theme file, but then if you are on a Retina display, it will look for search 24 at 2x, and if it's found, that will be good.
Have I talked about all these items? Okay, so now another thing that we change regarding with the user interface is that we've redesigned and made the toolbars fully configurable. So the toolbars are now redesigned. We've changed a bit what actions go into which toolbar. We've redesigned the icons, made them more pleasant to the eye. But don't be afraid if you are used to the previous layout of toolbars. These toolbars are fully configurable, so you can make them look as they were. So you can put which action you want in which toolbar you want. And that's also great because depending on your needs, on how you're using oXygen, you will need certain icons on the toolbar. You definitely don't want all the toolbars, and maybe you don't want the default icons that we put in a toolbar. Maybe you want a subset of that. And starting from this idea, like I said, the toolbars are now fully configurable. So from here you have a configure toolbars action, and there's a preview which helps a lot to identify which toolbar you want to customize, and you can show or hide a toolbar, or you can show and hide the actions from it individually, and you can also add a different action in your toolbar. So if the paste action is what you want, you can put it here. And you can also create your a custom toolbar in which to put your preferred and the action that you use more frequently. And all this configuration will be stored in the layout file. So that's great because it's just one place in which all the layout settings are being stored. So the views, which view to appear, which view to be hide, where a view should be presented, and now which toolbars and which actions. They all go into the same layout file. Let's talk a bit about the CSS development, especially for the author mode. So the oXygen author mode, just in case you don't know this already, is based on CSS rules. So the layout and formatting, you have to write a few CSS rules to control that. And that's great because CSS is simple and easy to use, but as things progress and as the rules become more complex, there will be situation in which you are writing a rule to make a title red, and there's another rule somewhere in your style sheets which has a greater precedence, and you have to dig up and find that rule, and at those points it can get really frustrated. So now we have, yes, I know, I'm looking for a more interesting element to inspect styles, and this is bugging me. Not a lot of space on this projector. So now for an element, you can see which rules apply from which CSS file. You also see these for all the static elements. So for the static content, the before elements in CSS, before and after. You can choose to see the computed file, the computed rules to get an idea. So normally you start from the computed rules. You'll see, oh, my color is this. Okay, let's see exactly which rules enforces in that, and so on. This path tab, we thought it might help understand why a particular rule apply at some given point, especially for the DITA vocabulary. There are where all the selectors are based on the class attribute. So this is the entire path of the element. You see the attributes on each ancestor, so you can understand why a rule applied or why it didn't. And if you want to change a rule, you can click on the link, the CSS will be open, and then you can change it as you see fit. Did you get a chance to test the CSS Inspector? It makes a difference, I can tell. You wouldn't have heard me saying that prior to having it, but it does help. So where is my slideshow? Another new addition in the CSS development aspect is support for less. So less, it's built on top of, it's an extension of CSS intended to add a few features that makes CSS development and maintenance easier. For example, in less you can define some sort of a variable. It's like a variable, and then I can just reuse it in both places, and when I have to change the value, I just go into one place and change it. The less support in oXygen means that you now have a specialized editor for editing less, and you can also directly you can generate CSS from the less files, and you can also directly associate the less file with an XML, and the author mode will automatically load it. We'll transform it into CSS and apply the rules.
How much can you define in a single less variable?
Well, I'm not a less expert.
How much can you define in a single less variable? That's just a single color value. Could you define spacing, line spacing?
Well, it has a number of
features like mixins.
I don't know, let's say concepts that allow you to specify a set of rules for different things. I think I have in my guide XML authoring, I used less for one of the styles, and it makes really very easy. It transforms CSS just like you just declare that special thing, and you get a set of styles.
Yes, you can also define some sort of functions and call the functions, and they output something. On the author part of the idea of the guided XML authoring,
don't go too much into that.
I won't. George has a presentation just for that. So we've added yeah, so it's interesting. You should follow George's presentation. The idea here is not to let the author make a mistake and offer quick fixes, but instead help him stay on the right track by inline hints and inline actions in the author mode. So he will see hints and get an idea what it should do in a particular element. It could get some actions to help him insert content. And again, it's all made possible with the versions 17 new additions. We have a new form control that can render HTML content. So this HTML content is an oXygen extension function, and it can render an HTML content. That's what we use for inline hints. You can now define actions directly in the CSS, and you can do it like this. So the oxy action binds a form control, an inline form control, and no, that's the oxy button, and the oxy action defines an action. So what's better now is, so previously in version 16, if you wanted to do this, you had to edit the document type and create an author action, and after that you could bind it here in the CSS. You could say, I want, when the button is pressed, to invoke the action with this ID, and that could get frustrated at times because you had to go into the preferences, you had to edit the document type, and you had to create the author actions. Have you worked with author actions? Have you? No? So, and there were situations in which you don't get everything right from the beginning. So after you close all the dialogues, you test the action and you see that something is not right. So go back there and test it again, and so on and so on. But right now, what's great is that you can define that the same thing right in the CSS. So you can just put the XML and the CSS side by side. You add the action, you test it in the XML, it's not going as it should, just switch to the CSS editor, make the change, and test it again.
Just a quick comment. Basically, the user interface to define custom actions can be used by anyone. They just select, I want to insert a fragment, here's the fragment, but it's not developer friendly. If you are a developer, you may want to generate those actions, not actually write them, or and then it's easier to just generate the CSS or write in the CSS as Alex said, and test the action.
And if you only
So define that action. So
and
it's
another
a
use
different use case
sure.
basically for a different category of people. So if you have someone that just writes XML and they need to define something, so then when they press the button they get some fragment inserted in the document, then defining the action with the graphical user interface is a lot easier for them.
Sure. Another new addition is the possibility to add any number of before and after elements in the CSS. You define it like this, you're giving it a level, and you can use any number of these levels. And George will show you how you can use these to create interfaces that will guide the user in its task. Another new addition concerns the alternate CSS support. So this is not something new. In the author mode, you could, for a long time, you could define a number of CSSs, each representing a different way of rendering the document in the author mode. So, for example, if we take the layers on a map as an example, in oXygen you could create an alternate CSS to see the roads and another CSS to see the elevation. But if you wanted to see both the roads and the elevation, you had to create a new CSS, and so on and so on, and things could explode at some levels. So that's why we changed the concept, and now you can define multiple alternate CSSs or layer styles, just like the layers on the map, and you will have one main style to bind them together. And you will also see that in George's presentation. So just like the layers on the map, I could just click on the roads and see the roads, and then I could just click on the elevation and see the elevation.
The main style is the map, the default rendering of the map, and the alternate style sheets can be set on off to see I don't know, roads or elevation or whatever other information you want to see in the document.
It's a lot easier.
I use that also later.
How many of you are familiar with the DITA vocabulary? Are using DITA vocabulary? A few. DITA support is quite powerful in oXygen, and we've invested even more effort into it. And what we've added, we now have the author mode is responsive. What that means, well, it's responsive. the screen is just so small that I but if the screen were to be bigger, you would have noticed two white stripes on the left, on the right. So, and as the screen got smaller, those sidelines disappear. I can tell you what is all about more technically. So we now support two media rules properties, the min width and the max width, and you can write rules like these. So you can say, if I have at least 25 centimeters of screen, then I can put a fixed width and maybe impose a minimum height.
So you get like a page layout. When your screen is bigger, you will not be able to read like that anyway. So we limit that to 20-something centimeters, and then you can the document is formatted.
So the author mode becomes responsive to the width of the screen. Two more media properties supported in the author mode are the OS and the platform. So now you can write CSS rules for a specific operating system and for a specific platform. The platform is intended for which oXygen distribution you are using, if it's a standalone or an Eclipse or an web app, and you can make the author mode look different on these types of distributions or on different operating systems. A few words about the WebHelp output. So this is a DITA transformation that we have. Publishing, the page loading time is now a lot faster. It's more easy to embed it. It generates a mapping file between the topic ID and the HTML output file, so you can create context, you can offer context sensitive help based on it. And actually that's what we're using now for our user guide. So when when user presses F1 in oXygen, something went wrong. I think my connection dropped. We open the WebHelp for the user. There's also now a sitemap being generated for search engine optimization. We have right to left support and Japanese search support. Some other useful additions, maybe a bit smaller but just as fun for us. We now have formatting support for XQuery and XPath, so kind of a pretty print concept in oXygen. There's CSS absolute positioning of blocks. What that means, it's better to show you a small example. So this is a small XML document, and it has a comment. And what I can do in the author mode now is to break the comment out of the document order. And of course, that's all possible by now supporting the CSS position property. Yes. So you can now make a block absolute or fixed, and put it anywhere in the author page. Again, about the DITA support in oXygen, we automatically detect the DITA Open Toolkit plugins parameters, and you can just give values for them. The find replace in file tool now ignores white spaces, so it's great if you're looking to words and because of formatting those words have ended up on different rows than different lines on different lines, then you will still find them. Previously you had to use maybe a regular expression to identify this particular situation. And about the dynamic content conversion feature, you'll have to follow George's presentation from tomorrow, so I won't say a word about that.
Can I ask about the replacement, that it's ignoring white space? Does the replacement intelligently interpret?
To put the white spaces back?
No, yeah.
No.
No, because even a human probably will not be able, if you replace 2 words with 3 words, or you will put a new line there.
Well, yeah, just
Yeah.
But if that situation is important for you, then you can use regular expression and capturing groups and solve it. On the SDK part, we've added a great number of extension points. It's best for you to see what's new in version 17 on the API side to see how they can help. What's more interesting, in the author mode you can now have JavaScript operations. So normally an author action was based on different operations like inserting an element or removing an attribute, and these operations had to be Java. So we provided a number of built-in operations. You could create your own Java custom operations. Now you can write JavaScript operations for these custom actions, and from the JavaScript code you can invoke our Java-based API to make changes in the author model. On the web app SDK, I don't know how much I want to talk about this. I have a presentation. It's adaptive. We have actions now on the toolbar, on the context menu. We've added API for providing additional actions, especially for the web app editor. We've also updated a lot of components like Saxon, XSLT and XQuery processor, the XML Calabash for Xproc. We've created a few new frameworks for JATS and XLIF. We've updated the support for XML databases, so we are now compatible with MarkLogic version 8, and with the latest Exist version, might be 2.2, not entirely sure. We're supporting Eclipse 4.5, and we've released some new features for the SVN client, which is both a separate product and also comes embedded in oXygen. So if you're using SVN as your versioning system, it might help you to know that. So that concludes my presentation. I think we have 5 minutes for questions. If you saw something that you liked and you want to find some more about it, yes?
Yeah. So the CSS view is quite nice to stop you from having to go in and out of the preferences pane to configure an author framework. But for everything else in author frameworks, you've still got to go in and out of that preferences view an awful lot. It's real pain. Maybe in the future, are there any plans to have a view pane that you can open like a DITA map
Mm-hmm. Yes, we've talked about this. A helper view came into our discussions. We're not entirely sure how to proceed, but we do know that at times going through all those dialogues, although friendly for the common user, can get frustrated for a hardcore developer.
There's also the idea to try to see, because the framework file is an XML format, so theoretically you can go and edit directly within that. It's not recommended.
So you need a framework for your framework stuff.
Yeah, it's the framework file. It's an XML format, and we can create a framework for that, right? But another idea would be if we just create a human, because that's a serialization format for us right now. But if we create a more human-friendly format that will generate that, it's another possibility, right? So but on the short term, of course, making that graphical interface available in a non-modal dialog or
sounds like
side view,
the more feasible.
Be something that difficult.
We
Just a matter of
we also
save the framework to reload it. Or
we also have a user who generates this configuration file, this XML configuration file from an xQuery. So it's Claudius who did something like that. So he's writing xQuery and then it's generating this configuration file. So people looked for solution.
Built a framework builder. Basically, he writes an xQuery script, and in that xQuery you can bind different events, like when this element changes, do this action, or things like that. And from that he generates a framework and extensions, Java extensions that set listeners on the author document and do all that. And this is available on GitHub. It's open source, available on GitHub. He presented that at XML Prague, at our meetup in Prague, and the recording of that is available.
I think it is available on our YouTube channel.
Yes. Do you maintain any central documentation on any cross-platform issues workarounds?
Well, I don't think
I'm not sure.
Like a central
knowledge base. Don't do this on Mac OS or.
We use Linux on a desktop. Certain issues that don't seem to happen on Linux, don't seem to happen on Windows, like dragging Windows to work, things like that. So like central point where you can find information out of some workarounds.
I'm not sure.
I don't think we have a. I mean,
we have a frequently asked questions section in our user guide when.
well, on Linux there are many window managers, how they are called, and they're all the time you get one that has a different behavior.
We'll think about it.
Yeah, so
see what we can do. Yes.
Some feedback forms.
Yes.
Some are there, some are at the table. So if you write that, then we can take it back with us. It's also registered probably now. No more questions?
No more question. Is it time for the coffee break now?